This is The Extra Mile.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to The Extra Mile. I'm Justin, and that's G5. George, how are you?
I'm here. I'm good.
He's here. We're here with Caleb always. Hey, Caleb, what's up?
Hey, I would wave, but I'm not on video today.
Well, reach out and wave. There he is.
There he is.
He's still there. He's in the corner. He's not real.
His spirit's with us.
He's a bird. Birds aren't real.
But we are here with our guest.
A special guest.
Yes.
Jordan Shouse. Did I say that right?
You said it right.
Oh, man. All those years of diction practice came to life.
That's good. I was waiting for you to say it, and I
Jordan
thought I get in
Shouse.
trouble.
I like that. I've always I love the show House, and so I have a 2-syllable last name, and I've been envious of people who have one, because then it's easily shoutable. Shouse.
It is. Especially angry.
Duncan. See, I want to be. It doesn't shout well.
Sorry.
It's laborsome.
Shouse does shout well. That's hard though. Anyway,
right.
Yeah, welcome to the podcast and welcome to Lubbock. Is this your first time here?
First time. First
In
time
Lubbock?
It is.
Did you fly here or did
Oh.
you drive?
I drove.
How was the drive?
It was long.
Did you take 20 or 82?
20.
Yeah.
So you had the wind turbines for
Yeah.
half of it, and then the red
For miles
for
and miles
miles
and
and
miles.
miles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's impressive. I don't know if you make the return drive at night, all of those turbines have, I guess,
Blinking red lights.
it's a
Really?
blinking red
Yeah.
light. The function of it, I think,
It looks
is for
like a
airplanes.
Yeah.
But they all blink in unison.
Oh, that's cool.
And as an electrician, I don't necessarily know how they do that unless it's wireless.
Yeah.
I mean, it's miles and miles and miles and miles and miles, and they're all blinking simultaneously. It's impressive to me.
I'm sorry. I just have to say, every time you say that, all I can think of is miles and miles from Lord of the Rings.
Oh, see, I think of Carl Sagan as like billions and billions.
The Dead Marshes.
Oh man.
Yeah. Right. We always go back to the Lord of the Rings. Ugh. Anyway, are you a Lord of the Rings fan?
I am.
Apparently,
All
this is
right.
a Lord of the Rings podcast. That we
Yeah,
talk about.
good. We watched yesterday. My kids are big into the Mario movie, but they made a
Okay.
parody of the Peaches song with the Precious.
Oh,
So
wow.
all of them sing. Have you seen that? Yeah.
That's
really good.
amazing. I love that.
See, everybody's a nerd.
I know.
Yeah, it is.
Deep down.
I'm a nerd too. I
Yeah.
really want the Rivendell Lego set. I was looking at it the other day, and I said, I want to buy that.
Oh man. Well, just the other day I bought an encyclopedia of Middle Earth.
Did you
On
really?
vacation? Yeah. That was so.
Y'all don't
so
know
cool.
this about me. Do you think I like Lord of the Rings?
No.
I'll
No.
prove it to you.
You don't like Lord of the Rings.
I'll prove it to you.
The number of times we've talked about Lord of the Rings.
My
and you're
best
like,
friend
"Oh."
and I, and when I was in Lubbock that first summer, we hand penned a map of Middle Earth
That's pretty cool.
with
Wow.
ink and nib. We
Wow,
hand-penned
feather?
It,
You
never-
just
it wasn't feather. It was
Oh,
just
okay.
Hobby Lobby special.
You moved a little bit up.
Yeah.
It's hanging over my bed right now. Yeah.
Okay.
My Rose lets me hang it on my side of the bed. It's one of my favorite possessions. So Daniel, this one's for you.
Well, Lord of the Rings makes Jordan real cool with the young people, which is kind of our focus and why we have him here in Lubbock too, is to talk to the younger people in our congregation and connecting with them, talking about youth and faith and the importance of those things. I saw on some of the things you're talking about Sunday, legacy and how important that is, phones. Just what is your background with the youth and why is that passionate to you? And give us a little bit of that.
Sure. I've been preaching for 15 years,
Yeah.
but have done a lot of work with young people. Part of it was in Chattanooga. When we moved to that church, they came in and said, part of what we want you to do is to start a young people's something. At least it's something with young people. So we had two. We had two high schoolers in the church, and so we had them over to the house, just me and my wife, and we just talked with them and hang out with them. But then by the time we left, 5 years later, we had 50 young people.
Wow.
Coming from their schools and other congregations, and it just kind of became a passion where it wasn't that we outset saying, okay, we want to pour our lives into young people. It was one of those things that when the door was opened and they started coming, we just love them. We love spending time with them.
Yeah.
We love that season of life. We love the potential that's in them, and there's something spiritually rejuvenating in young people, the zeal that they have that can be so inspiring when you see it alive. And so it's been a joy to go a lot of different places. I mean, a lot of different young people and spend time with them and encourage them. And at Cambell Road, we have a lot of young people. The church is about 400, but half of it is 18 and younger. So it's just been a great opportunity to spend a lot of time with a lot of young people.
Wow, that's an amazing opportunity.
Yeah.
And a huge growth from 2 to 50, and
Yeah.
that's awesome. And so do these kids just want to talk? Right?
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
They just need someone to talk to. They need a conscience almost.
That's really it. I mean, there are some things that they'd want to talk about in the Bible, but a lot of it is we open our Bible and say, what's going on in your life? What are some questions you have? What are some things that maybe in a different setting you wouldn't feel comfortable to ask, but we could do it here? And I think just knowing someone was there on their side and a safe place to be able to explore deep questions allowed for some really deep conversations. So
Wow.
It was a neat opportunity.
And that was attractive. That's awesome. That is awesome.
That's such an amazing time of life where, especially for those who don't have a parental figure or something that's a healthy, godly figure,
Yeah.
to have someone who's older who cares about them
Yeah.
and can help be an influence, not only for good but for God. And I think that's a great work that's inspiring you.
Yeah, absolutely. Part of it too is there's a lot of these young people, and some of them have similar backgrounds, good, solid homes, moms and dads, and a solid foundation. But there's a lot, and there's more growing of this along the way, where you have fractured homes in some element. Maybe a parent has passed away. Maybe there's one that's not in the home, and to be able to provide a stability, either of a presence of a father or mother, or maybe more akin would maybe be a big brother or big sister, but someone to be a presence in their life. It's meaningful. It's powerful to see them connect and to let that fuel them forward in a sense of confidence, spiritually and in life.
Yeah. Yeah, they need those social cues. They need to know. Yeah, they need someone there to help guide them. That's so important.
I don't think we ever really grow out of that. I think we always are looking to a mentor,
Yeah.
someone who we can look up to, whether that be actually in the words of the Bible or a physical person. There's a slight danger there because people are fallible, but a mentor to look up to and confide in, your close friends. I think that's all really healthy. But it's interesting to truly focus on the youth and that time of their life where hormones, body and life is changing. You're leaving the home and making your own way as a youth, as a young adult. As I know that was a particularly caustic time for me when I left home, went to school. For people when they are venturing out. So in that instability, it's good to have someone who's godly focused, helping to root them.
And with dealing with so many kids with different backgrounds, like you're saying, what's some of the big problems you think that kids are facing? I should say kids, like young adults.
Sure.
Are facing.
Well, kids and young adults. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's some that are the same across the board, and they were the same when we were young. There's obviously temptations in the world, but even they get to an age, and I think this is a big one now that's being maybe repackaged in a different way. It's just your identity. Who am I? What do I believe? Why am I here? What are my core values and the core structure of what it is I think? And all of that is being challenged and redefined by our culture about what makes you you. Certain attractions define you as a certain person, or certain maybe voting or identification markers. That's always big, is what makes you you, how do you define yourself and identify yourself. But then, of course, along the way spiritually, you're talking about the forming of faith and individual faith and what faith looks like in a growing, progressively digital world, which is challenging. Because part of, I think, the uniqueness, I think we can speak the same. How old are you, George?
I'm 27.
Yeah, we can speak the same.
Yeah.
Because when we grew up, we didn't really have a digitally connective world.
Yeah.
It was kind of piecemeal. We had bits and pieces here and there. We had dial-up.
I can romanticize that time, when I wasn't, technology wasn't constantly bombarding me. And people will say, well, isn't...
He's asking how old.
How old are you?
36.
Okay, I'm 37. I was like, we're the same.
Thanks for looking down on my youth, Justin.
No. He was just like, I was just like, wait, you're not 27. You can't be.
I could dream.
Yeah.
If you're 27, I'm 50.
People, screen time on phones is a big one too.
Yeah.
I don't want to come off topic, but
No,
it just seems like you were talking about technology having an impact on your identity.
Yeah.
Technology, they'll say, has always been there, and kids with TVs, and I had TVs, and all those things. But we were shutting the TV off was really, you could do that.
Easy.
It doesn't seem like we're able to shut the phones off anymore. We're able to shut the technology off.
That's right.
And that, I guess, has an impact on your
yes.
identity as well.
Yeah, well, and I think there's identity because they're looking through the source of the phones and social media to find validation
Sure.
and worth and success. But then maybe akin to that is in our more connective world socially, in terms of social media, we're far less connected year after year in terms of face-to-face interaction. And that's one thing the current generation is facing that maybe we didn't have in the same way.
Right.
Of you can have an experience online and like the same things and watch the same things and stream the same things, but then when we're gathered around a table like this becomes painful for youth to be able to be open and vulnerable face to face and share and experience life without a screen. And I think that's going to be a challenge for our lifetime, is helping the next generation navigate socially in an antisocial world, in a sense.
Wow, that's well said.
Yeah, it is. It is. So just being honest too, because when you do sit down at that table and you're revealing yourself, and you're not hiding behind a screen, you have to be honest with yourself, with the people sitting across from you. You can't just talk,
Yeah.
be rude and mean, or say what you want. You have to actually acknowledge another person's identity as well.
Yeah. We
Yeah.
think of how people interact on Facebook in terms of, or whatever,
Yeah.
TikTok or whatever I'm not sure what the teens today would be, discourse, wherever it is they're discussing. If you disagree online, there's a certain code of conduct, right? There's a certain way of doing it. But when we do that to be face-to-face, we can do a slugfest. I mean, there's all caps, and we're just
exactly.
we're drawing lines and dismissing one another quickly. That doesn't translate to having an open, honest discussion face-to-face. And it's hard our ability to disagree and yet be cordial and kind.
So where are kids then finding their identity in this technology? Is it in the political arena? Is it in the things and the experiences of influencers? What is it, and how can we find it biblically, I guess?
Yeah, those are great questions, and it's yes and yes and yes. That kind of depends on the kids. For some, it's politics, and I think that's probably more with parents who maybe are a little more outspoken on politics.
Yeah.
It blends itself really easy. Some, it's very much socially driven. In most of our Bible classes, when you talk about things today and you talk about popular figures, Mr. Beast is almost the main figure they talk about, and what is he saying and posting. And so for some it is. In fact, one of the things we'll talk about with the teens tonight is the role, a career path of an influencer and what that means. And that's so fascinating because who we're called to be as Christians is influence, right? Salt and light is all about influence, but there's a career path about influence. And so the world understands that, but for us to be able to see that in terms of a gospel perspective, that we're called through the way we live and speak to be influences. Influence is very powerful, and I think our society has stripped the power of it, right? It's using it more as a means to an end than maybe means to an end shallowly than it is spiritually.
What is the end for an influencer?
Well, I don't know. For most, for some it may be likes, maybe money, right? You get more
See, I
people
would
to
think
follow
it'd
you,
be money.
and probably money or fame, maybe recognition,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah. Well,
I'm not an influencer. I can't.
Well, it's intriguing to me when people look out into the internet space and they say, okay, well, you're looking through a screen, and that screen is telling you what to do, and it's inspiring you to choose. That's really what it is. I always boil it back to Solomon saying that there's nothing new under the sun.
That's right.
And so it's repackaged, perhaps we can use that term, but it's all the same, that nothing has ever changed, and that no new technology is going to introduce anything that's not sin versus sin.
That's right.
And I think that as a student of history, I think it's very important for us to know the stories of the Bible that God has given us, because I'm currently doing a recording for our congregation in Jeremiah, and I've never read Jeremiah before, and I haven't spent too much time in the Bible except a work that I took on, which is to record the scriptures, and it's forced me to read it. I needed to do that. That's what I needed to do, and I've learned a lot. Done a lot of theater and stuff like that. So story to me is very impactful.
Yeah.
Whereas that's hard for me to relate to a generation that might not be story driven.
Mm.
Because the Bible is very story driven.
Yeah.
Christ's teaching is story driven. We had a podcast recently where we recorded talking about Christ being the master storyteller.
Yes.
Whereas I think that deep down we all want to have that connection to story and learning and to be connected with one another, where we have that influence, where I guess addressing it from the children of God, you look at a worldly figure to be an influencer, much like the kings of old looked to other nations, or rather the children of Israel before they had a king, they looked to the other nations. So we want to be like them.
Yeah.
And God saying, well, okay, I'll
Yeah.
give you a king.
Give what you ask for.
And then all of the other follies that man befalls. And so to me, it's dismissible as, well, this is the road to destruction. We don't follow it. But I could completely understand how to some people that's not what they think. They think, well, this is what everybody else is doing. I want to do that too.
Yeah.
Where I think we all are like that to some extent. But it's interesting to think about technology in that way. How do you address that? How do you address that with, I mean, you obviously have hundreds of kids who are at your congregation.
Sure.
And how do you approach one who is Christ-minded or coming to church, actively religious, versus the ones who aren't and more in the world?
Yeah.
How do you address that between the two, or do you, or what?
Boy, there's layers to that, and I think that's the answer. Is there's layers, because some of this, when we're talking with young people, it goes back to home. It all goes back to home, and so while we can address certain symptoms with kids, and I loved how you said stories, even though a lot of the modern stories are really shallow, and so it's harder to relate. Kids love stories. We all learn through them. The other day we were talking about discernment, and so I took them back to the old Pinocchio, the Disney Pinocchio, that haunting Pinocchio, and they were glued. Most of them had never seen it before, but in walking through the story and in talking about the deep, dark, sinister deception underneath it all, it clicked, and they got it, and they understood what the story was illustrating. And so I think for some, using either scriptural stories, but even modern stories to call back to scriptural principles is always helpful for children. I'm always using it with my kids at home. In terms of helping teenagers to navigate the difference between technology and influence and their path, part of it is helping them to ask bigger questions outside of the 5 years they're in. You know, it's so hard for a middle schooler to think about being in college or being a young adult, or a high schooler to think beyond getting ready for college. But Scripture calls us to think with an eternal perspective today. And to the extent that we can help our young people see that the things we're doing today will make a difference not only for these next few years that you're a youth, but it will make a difference lasting for forever, for yourself and for those around you. It almost kind of helps to shatter their very shallow perspective of life and to see things from God's perspective. So I like to always try and talk about things in an eternal perspective. What will this do in eternity? How will these decisions shape and define who it is I'm trying to be here and there? And then, of course, a lot of this, and I think that's the greater perspective, is we got to go home. We got to talk with moms and dads about this, about our kids and their habits and their influences, that there's some things we cannot change. Right? We can't just go and throw away all iPhones and technology. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So how do we navigate in an electronic world, not losing sight of what matters the most?
Go back to that eternal perspective again. Does that not build anxiety for some?
Mm-hmm.
How do you combat that?
So in one sense, it's immensely terrifying
Right.
when you think about, okay, so my choices today are not just about losing friends or not getting on the date. You're talking about spending an eternity somewhere. And here's what's fascinating. There was a study that we conducted maybe 5 years ago or so. It wasn't that long before COVID. And we asked about the greatest fears that some of our young people had. And the number one fear was missing heaven. And there's something I think that's encouraging about that so many young people are concerned about heaven, but it also highlighted the anxiety. And I think some are so afraid of not making it and the stakes that are existing eternally. And so I'd love to hear from you guys, learn from both of you. What I have found, at least for right now, is helping them to place a greater confidence outside of themselves. That's why you need Jesus so much. That's why you need grace. That's why you need his mercy, is because you're not going to do it perfect in your teenage years. And in the times we fail and in the times that we fall, that's why we need his blood and his mercy and his grace. So if anything, it almost reinforces the power of the gospel. Is you're looking at eternal perspective, and I know that's daunting today, but realize that's why we have Jesus. That's why we have the answer.
That's really good. That's really good. So putting your confidence outside of yourself, not putting so much pressure on your own actions, what you're doing. Oh, I did this wrong again and again and again. Things like that.
Oh,
you're
yeah.
saying.
Yeah,
Okay.
perfect performance, perfect obedience.
Right. Yeah.
That doesn't negate holy living, right? But God's grace is a confidence that even when we fall, right, there's still a confidence of God's love and his mercy and the security of heaven. But it also reinforces why we live the way we do. In fact, it ought to motivate all the more holy living and righteous living.
Well, man, if that's the number one fear, we need to make sure we're teaching or we're talking about, not a work-based type idea that can create that fear, I guess.
Yeah.
That'd be my fear, I guess.
I think to zoom out too far, I'm pretty much a critic of the Church of Christ. I grew up in the church, but I've seen some pretty major atrocities that people of God can do to one another.
Sure.
If their heart isn't focused on God. And I would say that having read the book, I truly believe that this being the source of knowledge. I mean, there's knowledge to be gained in God's world. God created this world, and there's beauty in life everywhere, and God is everywhere. But to seek knowledge here, we've spoken a lot about in Ecclesiastes that God has placed eternity in man's heart. One of my greatest anxieties that I experience personally is the fear of dying.
Yeah.
I know I'm going to die, but I've witnessed many of my loved ones take their time and die.
Yeah.
And I mean not take their time. I meant like
It was their time to die.
it was their time to die.
Yeah.
And I experienced that as their loved one, and it was heart shattering, et cetera. And that's a point of anxiety for me. In the recent past, probably in the last 5 years, having read, I feel my closeness to God. And I think I had every now and then I'll have a period where that wave will come over me, and now I'm thinking about, okay, what's it going to feel like? Is it going to be like this, like surgery? Is it going to be like I fall asleep? What is it? Will it hurt? And then typically that's when the anxiety comes and my heart races, my blood pressure spikes, and I get the ringing in my ears. And then this last time I was able to have a lot more peace with it, to know that what I've read in this book is that there is a promise, and that brought me some peace. And I've had that since I was 12, after my grandfather first died. And so having those anxieties, it's almost, okay, I read in the Bible, black and white, it says, God has put eternity in our hearts, and we seek after these things. We seek after God. We grope about in the darkness, groping for him, trying to find him. And the answers are here. And it's not about getting a like. It's not about having your friends like you. Yeah. Though I do believe that if you're true and you're godly, that your friends will like you.
Yeah.
Like you're gonna have friends. You're gonna have people who want to be around you.
Sure.
You're going to be blessed with, Job was blessed with many friends. Who tried to influence him for bad and good, who were interested in sitting with him in his misery.
Yeah.
And I think that that's some comfort that the youth would be able to hold today, that, well, people aren't going to like me. Well, I had that.
Yeah.
We had that.
Yeah.
Well, if I wear this shirt, no one's going to like me.
That's right.
And we've all dealt with that. It's just not put on the internet for everybody to see. It was very much more fun. And I feel sad for this generation who everybody has a camera in their pocket. And so every mistake or major mistakes in your life might actually be recorded
Yeah.
and placed for everybody to see. Except I would feel, and once I am processing that and I'm thinking about it now, that's what I need.
Yeah.
I need to know, and I've said this before, I need to know that that camera
Yeah.
is always on me. Because I lose sight of that sometimes,
Yeah.
even now.
That's right.
And whenever I think God is watching me, my children are watching me, my friends are watching me, my parents are watching me, this person is standing next to me at the checkout line, this person who just cut me off in the vehicle, this person who's going to kill us because he's not going fast enough on the highway,
Yeah.
they're all watching me. And let me be an influence for God, how I need to act.
Yeah.
And that's what has inspired me to say, you know what? Let everybody see. Let everybody see that I'm a fool, because I am.
Yeah.
That's
Likewise.
funny. I was going to make actually the opposite observation.
Go for it.
I don't think you're wrong. I think that's a good observation. But having everything documented now and having your life on your phone, like I'm looking at my own kids and I'm realizing that every second of their life are videoed and pictured, puts a lot of pressure on how they act and on their works to do good and make sure you're doing the right thing. And it does feel like when you have a camera in your pocket, that there's a camera watching you, and that's a lot of pressure to do the right thing. And then you get bummed out and you do fear, oh, am I missing heaven or something like that? So I think it's just two different angles.
That makes sense.
I don't know.
See, now that you said that, it really inspired me to think that this generation, for the first time, has a cognitive, realistic, tactile experience of what we're all going to experience on the Judgment Day.
Yeah. Yeah.
When the book of life is opened and we have to take account for everything that we've chosen to do against God, Jesus will be our advocate, and he'll stand in our place. That's what the Bible says. That's what the grace of God, that's why he died for us. That's his blood saving us. But it almost feels like we lose sight of that because, well, it's not written down. Nobody knew that I did that. It was a dark alley.
That's right.
But the Bible says that all of the darkness will be brought to light.
Yeah.
All of the acts that were done in darkness, etc. I
That
know we're
does-
not quoting scripture yet, but we are talking about.
Well, I mean, that
We
does
should probably
go
look these
to
things up and
Ephesians
quote them.
5 here, which I had. You were talking about children of light. I know you're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
There's several different angles I wanted to go with that. You made a good observation. You had anything to add to that?
Well, so children of light, right? As we're talking about influence, and there's being influenced, and then there's being an influence,
Right.
right? And so Scripture talks about both, about being careful about the things that influence us, the things that take control of our heart. Kind of maybe a Proverbs 4 about guarding your heart, because from it flows all that you are. But Ephesians 5 talks about our role as God's children, and he calls us children of light, which I always thought was so fascinating, because he starts the chapter by just saying we're children. Imitate your father as loving children. But then he says, walk as children of light. And it's almost a way of saying, of all the attributes of God that you're going to imitate your father, this is one that we need to focus on. And he talks about this fruit of light and the work of light and the difference between light and darkness. He talks about influence.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, what's neat about that is it's not just identity, because there is identity. With light, it's very clear. It's not dark. It's free from anything that would be described as characteristic of dark, like evil and twisted and deceitful. But light also represents a purpose, because in the context, he talks about those who are asleep, and those who, he would use the language as Ephesians 5,
Verse 14.
in verse 14, awake sleeper, arise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. But he also talks about those who, in verse 6, let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of these things the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience. And he talks about how the fruits of disobedience in verse 11 are unfruitful. It's fascinating language in this section, because he talks about those who walk in the light, they bear good fruit. And it's not just good deeds, it's meaningful fruit. It's fruit of truth and righteousness. It's fruit that makes you whole and complete. But he says those who don't, and he calls them sons of disobedience, they're not fruitful. Their life is devoid of anything full of meaning or love or purpose. And he describes them then as if they're walking through life asleep. They're sleepwalkers. And so as children of light, it's as if he's saying, I want you to wake them up. I want you through the way that you speak and talk and live and behave, I want them to see something that pulls them out of this. And what they're seeing is not you. Well, you're a really cool person. You're a good person. They're seeing God in you. They're seeing the true light. They're seeing Jesus through, and verse down here, he talks about the fruit of light is truth and righteousness and goodness. And so he's seeing all of these beautiful fruit of Jesus in you. It's just a neat language. He's saying not only in our identity are we being influenced by God, but our purpose then is to be this influence because the world is walking around asleep. They don't know that there's a lot more to this life, and yet they're going to see that in you.
That's a great point. I know that inspires the reading that I've done recently of the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5-7. Christ specifically saying that you know them by their fruits.
Yeah.
And whatever fruits that's bared, if it's good fruit, a bad tree can't produce good fruit.
That's right.
And a good tree won't produce bad fruit. And if the bad fruit the bad tree that does exist is going to be cut down and thrown in the fire, which he says.
Yes, that's right.
That's the warning to us all. I think the parallel that I was mentioning earlier, I found it is Luke 8:17. It says, "For nothing is hidden that will not become evident, nor anything secret that will not be known and come to light. So take care how you listen, for whoever has, to him more shall be given." So this is Christ, the parable of the lamp. The light is a huge archetype that's spoken of constantly through the Bible.
Yes.
And being a lamp unto your feet that Christ is, but then you being a reflection of God's light in the darkness of the world. That's an amazing point that you just brought up, Ephesians 5, being asleep and the sleepwalkers of life. Who would you say, how would you categorize the sleepwalkers of our time? Those who probably haven't put on Christ.
Yeah.
But once you put Christ on, have you woken up?
Well, maybe the language from Scripture would be, you have your light, but you put it under a basket, right? You have the light. Maybe that's the language, or maybe even, remember 1 John 1, he talks about walking in light. He says, but if you say you walk in the light and yet you walk in the darkness, you deceive yourself. Yeah. I don't know the exact parable, but probably something like that would be someone who is sleeping through life is someone who is unaware of their purpose, unaware of their deeds, unaware of their calling. They're not thinking about the life, their influence, and their decisions. They're bearing between that and God, and they're bearing of that with others, how I'm living and how it's affecting others. I think of, you mentioned those who haven't obeyed the gospel. I think of Romans 3:23. We talk about that a lot. For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. I think we often talk about sin just as falling short. But if you look at that if sin is missing this mark and falling short, it means is God had this plan, this grand purpose for man. Right? He made us in His image. But then when we fail to do that and be that, we have missed it. We've missed that calling. And so we're wandering through life without a purpose. And there's a lot of people who are doing that. They're going to work 9 to 5, but they don't know why. They're raising children, but beyond just having children and furthering their name,
just
there's not
pay
much
taxes.
Yeah. Get a little more back every
Right.
tax season. So when you ask, like, why? What are you here for?
Yeah.
Like, what is this about? And your relationship with your neighbors and your bosses, it's either self-preservation, very selfish, or it's empty. There's a parallel maybe to this, and I'll kick it to you guys. I don't want to talk all the time. I want to.
We are guests. They hear us talking all the time.
Do you remember the movie Inside Out?
Yes.
It was fascinating. When that movie came out, there was a big discussion about identity. In fact, the Times magazine put out this article called "The Year of Identity."
Oh yeah.
As if for some reason this became really important all of a sudden. But if you remember in the movie, so there's this girl, and it's showing the inner workings of this young girl, and she has all these islands, these core islands, and it's all about who she is. There's family and friends and sports and silliness. But one by one, when she's tested with this major life change, they start to crumble.
Right.
And when each of them crumbles, one after another, what happens then is that she loses all of who she is. She just becomes lost. And in that one scene then, when you see her kind of just completely sunken and completely devoid of what made her, that's the picture. What happens when you build your life on these things that you were never meant to build your life on? when your life is about your family or your friends or your work or your sports, right? Those are things that can bring happiness. But when they become who you are and you're tested by a serious life challenge, right, a person falls. They were never made, they were never designed to be what life is about. It's almost like that Matthew 7. You've not built your life on a rock, you've built it on
Sand.
Yeah, sand. Or you've, maybe another way of saying, you've built your life on the gifts from the giver, but not the giver himself.
And when the gifts are taken away, or when that storm comes, Matthew 7,
Yeah.
when the wind blows and the wind blows and the rain falls and it beats against your house, it'll fall.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
So, oh, man, that's really good. So how do you keep that in mind? How do you keep that why in mind? Because we live in a world of instant gratification, and it's really hard to keep that why on the center of your mind.
Yeah.
That purpose, to follow the things of the light that we see are useful, as we read in Ephesians 5. And that passage in Ephesians 5 is really good, because Ephesians 5 is just all about, being a child, learning and being guided by everything. And he gives you all these actions, like, give thanks and do proper among the saints. And I love verse 11, do not participate in useless deeds of darkness, right? Those are things that we often think are useful in a world of instant gratification. But
Yeah.
God says, no, they're actually useless, right? That's building your house on the foundation, but instead even expose them, for it is disgraceful even to speak of things. And so, God wants us to follow things that are useful. How do we keep in mind those things that are useful? I just feel like we're always distracted, and it's really hard to focus on that.
Yeah. So I have two suggestions, and one might circle us back to something we started with in a moment. The first of which I think is always important for every generation to see through the shallow shine of the box of whatever we're looking at, and to see things from a deeper, more, again, eternal perspective. Maybe a passage to marry that to. Do you remember in Matthew 6 when Jesus says, don't lay up treasures that are just going to corrupt? And that's hard to see in the moment, because we're really good at seeing the flash. We're seeing the instant gratification, what this can bring. But if we can see the temporal nature of what we oftentimes are so drawn to, but then the things that last, right? Love lasts, compassion lasts, mercy will last. If we get ourselves to understand that, then we'll place our value in the things that will last for eternity. But here's the catch. Here's the other one. And this is where it connects us back. For young people, that's really hard.
Yeah.
But for those who've tasted life a little bit and have sought after the temporal things only to have them get eaten by moths and rust and decay, they've learned that, you can spend your life chasing things that ultimately are going to lead to dead ends. That's why it's so important for those who are younger to be the mentor and teacher of those who are younger, to say, even now, when it's hard for you to see it, you need to realize there are some things that are far more valuable than what appear. Right? There are the eternal things. That's why we have to have an older generation that looks back and blesses the younger and helps them navigate through these choices.
I think that seeking wisdom, we kind of touched on that, where the wisdom of those who are older, they've written songs about that. I think one came on the radio or Spotify the other day, where it's talking about how the younger people blame the older generation for their screw-ups.
Yeah.
Thanks for the world that you created.
Yeah.
Previous generation. Where I think if the intention and your heart is there, especially in God, I think that we've gotten a lot of interesting flack. I'm a pretty heavy reader on the atheist subreddit. I'd like to know kind of what people are talking about. And every youth pastor that is arrested for, having inappropriate relationships with kids.
Yeah.
There's a lot of predators out there who are wolves who are covered in sheep's clothing, as the Bible tells us.
Yeah.
But when it's meant and it's executed correctly, and it is pure, and it is true, and it is from God,
Yeah.
that level of mentorship is one of the greatest gifts that he's given us. You look at the relationship with Paul and Timothy, and even that letter to him to say, don't let anybody despise you. Don't let anybody hate you for being young.
That's right.
And that it's easy to do for, people who are older. This person's really talented. This person is very eager, and that could make people feel bad. And I know that we've all probably experienced that in some way, shape, or form.
Sure.
But to be the example of what we're supposed to do, which is to lift them up.
Yes.
Because the amount of insecurities that they might have, we as the older generation have it, if not infinitely more.
That's right.
Which is why they have those feelings. Yeah. So I think it comes down to, are you secure with who you are as a person? Are you secure with your position in the kingdom?
Yeah.
That the kingdom is, the illustration is that the kingdom is built up of many different body parts. And there are eyes and there are noses, and the eye cannot smell and the nose can't see, and that we all have a function within the kingdom.
Yeah.
And so for us to be celebrated for that difference, regardless of age, but then, as you're saying, to say, well, you're an eye and I'm an eye too, but I'm an older eye. And these are the mistakes that I made. Don't make my mistakes.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
I think everybody's searching for that. I'm 37 and I still want that. I wish that I could talk to my grandfather. I wish I could talk to old preachers who are gone and old elder friends. I keep talking about Jim. I wish that we could have a conversation with him again. So I think to be able to look to God, because it's written in a page, that's an invaluable resource. Amen. This book that we can always look to, not only the great mentor of our peers and humankind,
yes,
but to the true mentor, to Christ and to God.
That's right. The true light. Yes.
Are we out of time? 10 minutes. Okay.
I mean,
we have so much to talk about. I've been enjoying our chat.
No, it's been really good. So those two things, focus on things that are eternal, love and compassion, and then the other one is have a mentor.
Yeah.
You can be open with and honest and confide in. Someone who has lived life and experienced those things that are eternal. So those two things will help you focus on that why, help you be a child of light, and have that purpose. That's really good. Now, another thing you're going to talk about as it kind of goes into this, and that idea of mentorship, is that legacy.
Yeah.
And how important is that legacy?
Oh, immensely important in every facet of life, right? I mean, there's not a facet, whether if it's business or sports, do this all the time, but especially for these kind of discussions about just life and spirituality, about what we're talking about is a generation that is trying to bless the generation that comes after it in any capacity. Whenever we lose that I don't care about those who come on after me, they can do this on their own, we are immensely damaging a future component of what is to come in any facet, right? But that Scripture points to this all over the place, whether it's Proverbs 13, verse 20, he who walks with the wise will be wise, or the pictures of a Moses who works with Joshua, to where when he goes up on the mountain, Joshua's ready. He takes over the mantle, and they go right on into the promised land. I just think about the two sides of this which are challenging. One side is an older generation that finds a meaningful purpose in reaching back and confidence.
Right.
I don't have to be a preacher. I don't have to have a lot of knowledge, but I've learned through life. I've learned through walking with God for 40, 50 years. I have something to offer. And so it's a compassion and a confidence to reach backward and say, whatever I can share, whatever good example or teaching, I'm going to do that. But the other side is a younger generation that is willing to listen and to say they have something that I don't have. They have age and experience and knowledge. And sometimes that's the greater issue, is an older generation that's saying, hey, I've got something for you. And the younger generation that says, I got that. There's a TikTok on that. I don't need to watch you. I'll find something better on that.
Right.
So there's two sides that if both come, and I think maybe the recipe is humility, if both come with humble hearts and willing to share and learn, man, something precious can happen. There's a passage I wanted to share with you all. I know there's a greater context to it, but I love the language of it. In Joel chapter 1, verse 3, it says, tell your sons about it, and let your sons tell their sons, and let their sons, the next generation. So I want you to tell your sons who are going to tell their kids who are going to tell their kids. One generation to another to another.
Right.
I think it's an amazing goal. And I think, unfortunately, the Bible is very much filled with the majority of it being not so.
Yeah.
Where that didn't happen.
Right.
And I think that's the ominous lesson to learn, where we have to listen to the things that are good and spread the good and be an influence.
Mm-hmm.
And I think your illustration of that needs to be generational.
Yeah.
You need to influence time.
Yes.
And you need to influence the people who are going to be here 2, 3, 4, 500 years from now.
That's right.
Because we always look back to those stories of the saints, the story of the martyrs, the story of our apostolic fathers,
Yeah.
and then the Father
Yes.
and his Son. And we always look back to them. And that's the light in the darkness. The darkness is always going to be here. The
That's right.
world.
Yeah.
So that's a great point. I love that.
Well, you want to close us out in our question, our last one?
Yeah, so we always ask our guests, it's the namesake of the podcast in Matthew 7, Jesus is teaching at the Sermon on the Mount to say that if any man or anyone conscripts you to go a mile, go with him too. And at the time, it was Roman policy for a soldier to be able to conscript a person and carry any burden for them for the length of a mile. And Christ pretty radically saying, don't just go a mile, go another mile.
Yeah.
And then he goes on to say, if somebody sues you for your shirt, give him your coat. If someone slaps you in your face, turn him the other cheek. These are pretty radical concepts where we as Christians sometimes forget. We need to be reminded of that. And so in other fleshings out, I'm asking you as sort of a preacher of the gospel, but then someone who works with the youth and in your ministry, how would you advise people who are believers, who aren't believers? How can they go the extra mile? You coughed during the accent. Let me do it again. Get it out now.
Sorry.
Good emphasis. Yeah.
We'll edit that out.
Go the extra mile with the Kleenex.
How did you go the... excuse me. Anyway, that was a great build-up. And say it. You're coughing, aren't you? It's fine. Anyway, we're talking about how do you go the extra mile. Well done.
That's be fun editing
That was
that out.
brutal. That we're actually going to have to edit that out.
You won't be able to edit that one out.
Oh well, we try to keep it. We try to keep it real here.
Yeah.
On the extra mile. But anyway, how would you say, in your experience, what would you say would be a way that people can go the extra mile for their fellow man?
I love that. It's an excellent question. First, let me say thanks for sharing the conversation. Love getting to talk with you both. This
Yeah,
is
thanks
great.
for being
Really
here.
enjoyed this. Maybe to say it this way, if you're going to go the extra mile, as Jesus commands, don't go alone. Take someone with you, but take someone who's coming behind you. There's always someone coming behind. There's always a generation that's yet younger. And so as you're looking at life and you're looking at all the good things that can be done, share that. Share the things you're learning. Share in the opportunities of service. Share in the things that you're growing in the Word of God. Life is a lot better when we make it better for the next generation to come. My parents had the rule growing up, you leave things better than how you found it. And that's because a generation left it better for us when we inherited it. No generation's perfect, and the younger generation's going to see that in us. They're going to see our flaws, and they're going to see our failures. But I think we need to invite them to. Invite them to see that we're not perfect. Invite them to see, how do you handle your struggles? How do you handle your failures? And honestly admit that and recover with grace, with God's grace. Let them see what it's like to be a father in the 30s or in the 20s with young kids and trying to navigate this world. Invite someone into your life, because one day, all too soon, they're going to be here and they're going to be in this position. And I think it's our hope that when it's our next generation, our kids' generation, that they're going to do the same thing, and they're going to look backwards and want to bless the generation that comes after them. We're only here because the people who helped us and mentored us and shaped us. And so to the extent we can do that for someone else, we'll just keep on helping the kingdom to grow. And for that beautiful heart of wanting to go the second mile, continue on with another generation.
That's awesome.
That's a great. Wow, that was fantastic. We're going to use that as a short.
Yep.
Bing.
That was really well said. No, I think it's beautiful. It's an amazing concept to not only go, but don't go alone. Bring somebody with you. That's amazing. That's a lot of great things to talk about. Jordan, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And thank
Yeah.
you for being our guest. Thank you for being a guest here at our congregation and for teaching our youth and for teaching the gospel. And we wish you well and we bless you in those things. And we hope that God blesses you as well.
Thank you so much.
All right. Like always, go sell. If you want to know more about the Bible or you have any questions, our email is in the description below. You can DM us. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're looking for a church family or you're in the Lubbock area, we invite you to come visit and hang out with us in Milwaukee. We love for you to find a church who practices the love of Christ.